There are a number of well-developed game engines out there on the market and powering modern AAA titles, some of which are available to download for free and work on with personal PCs and Mac computers. Unreal Engine is a great example of an engine that was and is in development and came out as a free open source piece of software for members of the public to use, develop and play around in. This has resulted in a large number of new early access and indie titles making their way to the mainstream market, and it's also the reason why certain older games are returning again after being absent and without love for so many years. Whilst there are some engines that are freely available, there are also some engines without this freedom, engines that are tied to certain publishers, certain developers. A great example of this is the highly decorated Frostbite engine. This has made a name for itself with games like Battlefield, Battlefront, Need for Speed and a plethora of other game titles like Dragon Age. What do all these games have in common? Electronic Arts, or EA as you might more commonly know them as. The publisher of these games are the owners of the legendary engine, hence their games and their games only are the ones that get to use the engine. So what does this mean for gaming? Should all games be open sourced, all tied, or a mixture of both? Let's have a look at two sides of the argument. Let's look at Unreal Engine first as the primary example for open source engines, although there are others available like Unity and other things like that. This engine is primarily developed by Epic Games and also has input from its thriving community, thanks to the work that Epic Games do to promote and teach their engine. They do weekly live streams and post regular blogs and interact with the community so that they can teach the community how to use their engine properly. Some of these people actually go on to develop new parts of the engine itself. Because the engine is open sourced, it means that anybody can download it and begin developing. This is one of the main reasons why so many early access games have come to market recently. Ark Survival Evolved is one of the main ones that comes to mind. Another result of the engine being open sourced is that like-minded people can work together towards a common goal more easily. Unreal Tournament was a classic arena shooter that had a major part in bringing the first-person genre to the mainstream, hence it was one of the more popular games back in the day. It was built in a very early build of Unreal Engine, and going back and playing it today reveals just how dated the game actually is. But because that game had such a large, thriving community, people are now coming together with the release of the updated engine to recreate the same mind-blowing experience that they had years ago for others with a modern engine. The engine now being open sourced means that anybody can create content for the game. The game is completely community backed. So the overall result of Unreal Engine is that more high quality games have been released and put into development in the past 18 months than before. This has been made possible by the open source nature of the engine. Because more and more people are now able to access a proper engine outside of a closed environment, the amount of talented games designers has also skyrocketed, resulting in the jobs market for games designers becoming even more competitive. Now let's look at an example of a tied game engine. Frostbite is the primary engine for EA's new AAA titles, and it has slowly worked its way into all of the publishers' genres ever since it was first used in Battlefield Bad Company back in 2008. The engine has seen major developments since then, both in terms of graphical fidelity and gameplay mechanics. There's no doubt that it's probably the best looking engine on the market right now, closely followed by CryEngine, an engine that was recently released as open source, I might add. Instead of looking specifically at the Frostbite engine, however, I would like to look at another tied engine. The Creation engine is tied to Bethesda, and their games take so long to develop that when the game finally releases, the engine is almost to the point where it is outdated by the other engines out there. Making this engine open source could mean that the developers could take the engine developments from the community, implement them as the game develops, resulting in the engine feeling more up to date when the game finally releases. Given that Fallout 4 and Skyrim took somewhere in the region of 5 to 7 years to create from start to finish, significant development can be made in mechanics, graphical effects, performance and audio of engines in this time. So borrowing from community development is a good way of implementing modern systems into games with long development cycles. An example of this in a tied engine would be with Battlefield Hardline in Frostbite 3. By the time it came around to developing the final DLC for Battlefield Hardline, a new graphical technology had been implemented into the engine with new reflections and shadows. These effects can be found on one of the DLC maps for Hardline and is not present in any of the other maps in the game whatsoever. So this proves that tied engine games are capable of implementing new technologies into an engine that's being used to develop a current game. But this is where the line between tied and open game engines becomes blurred, because you could argue that Frostbite isn't necessarily completely tied and restricted. Sure, it's restricted to just EA's titles, however EA are an incredibly large organisation and have a vast amount of developers working for them, developing a wide variety of games. They have BioWare making the RPGs, DICE making the first person shooters, and Ghost Games making the Need for Speeds. Having multiple development teams creating a wide variety of games in the same engine is great, because new developments made by one team can be implemented into the engine for the other teams to use in their games. This means that technically there could be a Battlefield game with the driving mechanics of Need for Speed. An example where this has actually been used is between Battlefield 4 and Battlefield Hardline. When Battlefield 4 first launched, its netcode and server speeds were nowhere near up to scratch, and developments made to the engine to fix that were implemented into the engine whilst Hardline was being developed, meaning that when the game first launched, we didn't have these netcode issues that we did with Battlefield 4. This is where certain publishers differ from others, because EA is fortunate enough to have these multiple developers working for them all at once, whereas Bethesda only has one development team using the creation engine, Bethesda Softworks. In this case, tied engines are beneficial because multiple development teams accelerate the development of the engine, resulting in more high quality games being developed and released. I believe this to be only true for engines that are used by multiple development teams, however. So in conclusion as to what's better, open source or tied, I'm torn because there are so many benefits for both. An open sourced engine gives developers the community support if they require it, and it can also help younger people like me break into the games industry with providing experience and allowing people to put together a sort of portfolio of their work. However, tied engines can also have their benefits if there are large and numerous teams behind them, as the Frostbite engine has shown that with the right sort of love, it can become one of, if not the greatest engine. So I'd have to say that a mixture of both types would be the most beneficial for the gaming industry. Having a few open source engines that allow people to get together and create great stuff, whilst also having some well supported tied engines to pump out the big blockbuster games. That being said, this is just one man's opinion, and I personally think that it's slightly biased towards open source engines purely because it's the only type that I've had the experience actually working with, creating with, and editing with. But let me know what your thoughts are down below. What do you think about this whole open sourced and tied game engine thing? What do you think would be better for the gaming community? Let me know in the comments below, and I'll be sure to reply to as many of them as possible. If you enjoyed, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe for more videos like this, and I shall catch you in the next one.